It was supposed to be a quick visit to check on tenant complaints about lobby security, but when the racist guard saw a black woman approaching the executive floors, he immediately assumed she was up to no good. His aggressive questioning, demand for multiple forms of identification, and threat to call police created exactly the kind of discriminatory incident that had prompted her unannounced visit. By the time he finished explaining why people like her didn't belong in luxury office buildings, he had unknowingly sealed his own fate. The woman he had profiled and humiliated was about to reveal that she owned every square foot of the building. Sarah Williams stepped out of her black Mercedes at exactly 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the sidewalk in front of Commerce Tower. At 38, she was one of the youngest commercial real estate moguls in Chicago, with a portfolio worth over $200 million and a reputation for creating inclusive, professional environments in all her properties. But today she wasn't arriving as the celebrated businesswoman whose photo graced the covers of industry magazines. Today she was conducting what she privately called a discrimination audit. For the past 6 weeks, Sarah had received an alarming number of complaints from black tenants and visitors about discriminatory treatment in the lobby of Commerce Tower, her flagship property. The complaints were consistent and disturbing. Black professionals were questioned more aggressively than white visitors, asked for multiple forms of identification, and subjected to security screenings that other guests never experienced. When Sarah brought these concerns to her property management company, they dismissed them as isolated incidents and assured her that their security staff received regular training on appropriate customer service. But Sarah's instincts told her there was more to the story. She had built her business on attention to detail and personal accountability. If discrimination was happening in her buildings, she needed to see it firsthand. Commerce Tower rose 32 floors above downtown Chicago, its glass and steel facade reflecting the success of the businesses housed within. Sarah had purchased the building 3 years ago when it was underperforming and transformed it into one of the city's most prestigious business addresses. The lobby was a masterpiece of modern design, polished marble floors, contemporary art installations, and a security desk that projected professional competence while maintaining welcoming aesthetics. As Sarah approached the building entrance, she observed the usual flow of afternoon business traffic. Men and women in expensive suits moved purposefully through the lobby, some heading to the elevator banks, others stopping at the directory to locate specific offices. The scene looked exactly as she had envisioned when designing the space: professional, efficient, and inclusive. But Sarah knew that appearances could be deceiving, especially when it came to how different people experienced the same environment. Marcus Thompson looked up from his security desk as Sarah entered the lobby. At 45, Marcus had worked building security for over a decade, moving from property to property as his confrontational approach to the job created problems with management and tenants. He had been hired at Commerce Tower 6 months ago when the previous security firm was replaced, and he considered himself an expert at identifying problem visitors who might threaten building security or make tenants uncomfortable. The moment Marcus saw Sarah, his mental profiling system activated. Despite her obviously expensive clothing, a tailored navy blue suit, designer handbag, and jewelry that suggested substantial wealth, Marcus's prejudices overrode his professional judgment. In his warped worldview, black women in office buildings fell into predictable categories. They were either lost and looking for government offices, seeking employment in cleaning or maintenance positions, or attempting to gain access to areas where they didn't belong. Sarah moved through the lobby with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she went. She had dressed carefully for this test, choosing an outfit that clearly signaled professional success and business legitimacy. Everything about her appearance should have triggered respectful, welcoming service from building security. As Sarah approached the elevator bank, Marcus rose from his position behind the security desk. "Excuse me, miss," he called out, his tone already carrying an edge of suspicion that he never used with white visitors. Sarah turned, her expression professionally neutral. "I need to see some identification and know what business you have in this building," Marcus said, positioning himself between Sarah and the elevators. The demand was immediate and telling. Sarah had observed dozens of visitors enter the lobby in the past few minutes, including white individuals who looked far less professional than she did, and none had been stopped or questioned. Marcus had singled her out based solely on her race. "I'm here for a business meeting," Sarah replied calmly, recognizing that she was experiencing exactly the kind of discrimination her tenants had described. "With who?" Marcus pressed, his tone becoming more aggressive. "What company? What floor?" Sarah noticed that Marcus's questioning was far more intensive than standard security protocols required. "Executive offices," she said simply, not wanting to reveal her identity until she had documented the full extent of his discriminatory behavior. Marcus's suspicion deepened. In his prejudiced mindset, black women didn't have legitimate business with executive-level companies in luxury office buildings. "I need to see your ID and call up to verify you're expected," he said, pulling out a clipboard with visitor registration form. The demand for identification was another red flag. Sarah had watched other visitors proceed directly to elevators without any security screening. Marcus was implementing enhanced protocols based solely on her race, exactly the kind of discriminatory treatment that had prompted her investigation. Sarah produced her driver's license, observing Marcus as he examined it with exaggerated scrutiny. He compared her appearance to her photo multiple times, as if searching for evidence of fraud or deception. His behavior was insulting and unprofessional, designed to make her feel unwelcome and questioned. "Sarah Williams," Marcus read aloud, not recognizing the name despite the fact that it appeared on his employment paperwork as the building owner. "What kind of business meeting is this? Sale? Service call? Job interview?" The assumptions embedded in Marcus's questions were deeply offensive. He couldn't conceive of Sarah having legitimate executive-level business, so he assumed she must be seeking employment in a service capacity. His tone suggested that he considered her presence in the building inherently suspicious. "Business consultation," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional composure while mentally documenting every aspect of the discriminatory encounter. Marcus made notes on his clipboard, with obvious skepticism. "This is a professional building," he said, his voice carrying a clear warning. "We maintain certain standards here. I need to verify that you're actually expected before I can let you proceed." The statement was loaded with racist implications. Marcus was essentially telling Sarah that people like her didn't meet the building's standards, and that her presence required special verification. It was exactly the kind of discriminatory language that her tenant complaints had described. "I understand," Sarah said calmly, knowing that Marcus was creating a documented trail of his own discriminatory behavior on the building's security cameras. Marcus picked up his phone and made a show of calling various offices, claiming to verify Sarah's appointment. The calls were clearly performative. He wasn't actually trying to confirm legitimate business, but rather hoping to catch Sarah in what he assumed was a lie about her reason for being in the building. After several minutes of fake phone calls, Marcus set down his phone with obvious satisfaction. "Nobody upstairs is expecting a Sarah Williams," he announced, his tone suggesting he had caught her in deception. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the building." Sarah felt her professional composure beginning to crack, but she maintained her experimental approach. This was exactly the moment that would test Marcus's commitment to his discriminatory assumptions. "I think there may have been a misunderstanding," she said diplomatically. "No misunderstanding," Marcus replied firmly. "You don't have legitimate business here, and I need you to exit the building immediately." Marcus's escalation was predictable but still shocking in its blatant racism. He had moved from questioning to ejection based solely on his assumption that Sarah couldn't possibly have legitimate business in a luxury office building. His behavior represented everything that was wrong with discriminatory security practices. "And if I refuse to leave?" Sarah asked, curious to see how far Marcus would take his discriminatory power trip. Marcus's response revealed the true depth of his racism. "Then I'll call Chicago police and have you removed for trespass. This is a private building, and we don't tolerate people who don't belong here trying to gain access to areas they have no business in." The threat was the final piece of evidence Sarah needed. Marcus was prepared to have her arrested rather than consider that his assumptions about her race and legitimacy might be wrong. He had created a scenario where a black woman's presence in a luxury building was inherently criminal, requiring police intervention to resolve. Sarah made her decision. The discrimination audit had provided more than enough evidence of systematic racist treatment. It was time to reveal who she really was. Marcus, Sarah said, her voice carrying a new authority that made him pause, "I think you should know who you're speaking to." Marcus's expression shifted slightly, sensing a change in the dynamic, but not understanding what was happening. Sarah reached into her designer handbag and produced her business card, setting it on Marcus's security desk. Sarah Williams, CEO and owner. Williams Commercial Properties. This is my building. Marcus stared at the business card as if it were written in a foreign language. The elegant cardstock, embossed lettering, and corporate logo left no room for doubt about its authenticity, but Marcus's mind struggled to process the information. The black woman he had just threatened to have arrested was the person who owned the building, employed him, and had the power to fire him immediately. I don't understand," Marcus stammered, his confident authority evaporating as the reality of the situation sank in. Sarah's voice remained calm but carried unmistakable power. "What you don't understand, Marcus, is that, for the past 15 minutes, you have been demonstrating exactly the kind of discriminatory behavior that my tenants have been complaining about for months." The lobby around them had fallen silent as other visitors and building staff realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Several people discreetly positioned themselves to observe the confrontation, sensing that Marcus's career was about to end in spectacular fashion. "You demanded my identification while allowing white visitors to pass without question," Sarah continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the lobby. "You subjected me to interrogation that you don't apply to other guests. You made assumptions about my legitimacy based solely on my race. And when I didn't satisfy your racist expectations, you threatened to have me arrested for trespassing in my own building." Marcus tried to recover, his voice shaking. "Ms. Williams, I was just following standard security protocols, standard protocols that you selectively apply based on race." Sarah cut him off. "Protocols that assume black visitors are lying about their business in the building? Protocols that treat people who look like me as inherent security threats?" The gathered crowd was transfixed by the role reversal. Marcus had gone from aggressive authority figure to desperate employee facing termination, while Sarah had revealed herself as the ultimate authority in the building. The power dynamic had completely flipped. Sarah turned to address the lobby full of witnesses. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just observed is an example of systemic discrimination in action. It's not always dramatic or obvious, it's the subtle assumptions, the extra scrutiny, the denial of basic respect that should be given to every person entering a professional building." She faced Marcus directly for her final statement to him. "Your employment with this building is terminated immediately. You will be escorted from the premises, and today's incident will be documented in your personnel file." Marcus's career in building security was over. His discriminatory behavior had been witnessed by dozens of people and recorded by multiple security cameras. His assumptions about Sarah's race and legitimacy had cost him everything. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had exposed individual discrimination, but real change would come from addressing the systematic issues that allowed such behavior to flourish. Over the following weeks, Sarah implemented comprehensive reforms across her entire property portfolio. She mandated unconscious bias training for all security staff, established clear protocols for visitor interactions that prohibited racial profiling, and created an independent complaint system for tenants who experienced discrimination. She also used the security footage from Marcus's discriminatory treatment as a training tool, showing her entire security team how subtle prejudices could manifest in professional interaction. The video became required viewing for all Williams Commercial Properties employees, a stark reminder of how discrimination could poison workplace environments. The incident's impact extended beyond Sarah's buildings. When she shared her experience at commercial real estate conferences and in industry publications, it sparked conversations about discrimination in professional buildings across the entire sector. Other property owners began examining their own security practices, recognizing that systemic racism could exist even in businesses that prided themselves on professional excellence. Sarah's tenants responded positively to her transparency and commitment to change. Rather than being embarrassed by the discrimination incident, they respected her willingness to personally investigate their complaints and take concrete action to address problems. Occupancy rates actually increased at Commerce Tower as businesses appreciated leasing space in a building where discrimination was taken seriously. The legal implications were significant as well. Sarah's documentation of discriminator treatment provided ammunition for civil rights attorneys representing other victims of building security discrimination. Her willingness to testify about racial profiling in commercial properties helped several tenants and visitors win settlements against other property management companies with similar practices. But the most important impact was personal. Sarah had transformed a painful experience of discrimination into a catalyst for meaningful change. She had used her power and privilege as a building owner to expose injustices that less powerful visitors had been forced to endure silently. 6 months after the Marcus Thompson incident, Sarah returned to Commerce Tower for a surprise visit. This time, she announced herself as the building owner from the moment she entered. The difference in treatment was remarkable: respectful service, genuine welcome, and the kind of professional interaction that every visitor deserved, regardless of race. As she walked through the lobby, observing interactions between security staff and visitors of all backgrounds, Sarah felt satisfied with the progress. The changes hadn't been easy or immediate, but they had been necessary. Her building now stood as an example of how commercial properties could confront their own discriminatory practices and emerge stronger. During her visit, a young black professional approached Sarah in the lobby. "Ms. Williams," he said, "I read about what happened here last year. Thank you for making this a place where people like me can conduct business without being made to feel like criminals." Sarah smiled, remembering why she had entered commercial real estate in the first place: to create professional spaces where success was measured by achievement rather than appearance, where opportunities were available to everyone willing to work for them. The transformation of Williams' commercial properties became a case study in business schools and corporate training programs across the country. Sarah's willingness to personally experience discrimination in her own building, document systematic problems, and implement meaningful changes demonstrated that ethical leadership could drive both social justice and business success. Marcus Thompson never worked in building security again. His discriminatory treatment of Sarah had been witnessed by too many people and documented too thoroughly for him to find immersement in any reputable property. His assumptions about race and legitimacy had destroyed his career and served as a warning to others who might consider treating building visitors differently based on skin color. Years later, when asked about the most important decision of her business career, Sarah didn't mention property acquisitions or development projects. She talked about the day she walked into her own building as an anonymous visitor and decided to turn a moment of personal discrimination into an opportunity for industry-wide change. The incident had taught her that owning buildings wasn't enough. She had a responsibility to ensure that the spaces she created were truly inclusive and welcoming to everyone. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was also bad business that drove away tenants, created legal liability, and damaged reputations. But the real transformation came in the months following Marcus's termination. Sarah discovered that the discrimination problem extended far beyond one racist security guard. Her investigation revealed a pattern of hiring practices that favored candidates who fit the building's image code language for excluding people of color from customer-facing positions. She found that cleaning crews, maintenance staff, and service providers were consistently treated as second-class citizens within her own properties, often subjected to different entrance procedures and restricted break areas. The systematic nature of the discrimination shocked Sarah, even as someone who had experienced racism throughout her career. She realized that her success as a black woman in commercial real estate had insulated her from the day-to-day prejudices that affected other people of color working in her buildings. The Marcus Thompson incident had been a wake-up call about institutional racism that existed under her own roof. Sarah's response was comprehensive and unprecedented in the commercial real estate industry. She hired Dr. Patricia Johnson, a leading expert in workplace diversity and inclusion, to conduct a thorough audit of all Williams commercial properties locations. The audit revealed discriminatory practices at multiple properties, ranging from subtle bias in tenant interactions to overt racism in security procedures. The findings led to immediate changes across Sarah's portfolio. Every security guard, maintenance worker, property manager, and administrative staff member was required to complete 40 hours of diversity and inclusion training. Sarah established an anonymous reporting system for discrimination complaints and hired an external firm to investigate all allegations. She also implemented a mystery shopper program, sending people of different racial backgrounds to test how they were treated at building entrances and during business interactions. The financial investment was substantial, but Sarah considered it essential for both moral and business reasons. Within 18 months of implementing the new policies, tenant satisfaction scores increased dramatically across all her properties. Several major corporations specifically chose to lease space in Williams Commercial Properties buildings because of their commitment to inclusive practices. Sarah's story reminded everyone that assumptions based on race weren't just personally offensive, they were professionally destructive. When security guards discriminate against visitors, they lose the trust of tenants, create hostile work environments, and expose property owners to legal action. When they embrace inclusion, they contribute to successful, thriving business communities. The security guard who had profiled Sarah based on her race learned that discrimination has consequences, but those consequences extend far beyond individual careers. They poison work environments, destroy business relationships, and undermine the professional communities that commercial properties are supposed to foster. Sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger or confrontation. It's the quiet authority that comes from owning the building where it occurs. Sarah Williams had that authority, and she used it to transform not just her own properties, but the entire industry's approach to inclusive security practices. Her experience proved that when discrimination meets ownership, when prejudice confronts power, and when assumptions encounter reality, justice isn't just possible. It's inevitable. The only question is whether the people implementing discriminatory policies will learn from their mistakes or be replaced by those who understand that professional respect should be available to everyone who earns it.